The Apache and Hokum attack choppers are absolutely amazing in Battlefield 2042 and are completely slept on. Most pilots tend to lean towards the Nightbird for its sweaty infantry farming talent, or the stealth choppers for their ability to completely negate anti-air missiles, leading to some low-risk flying. But me, I've always loved the attack choppers, even pre-5.3 patch. No other vehicle is capable of cleaning up enemy armour faster than the attack choppers. I don't just mean that they can deal with one annoying tank, I mean that it can deal with all of the enemy team's armour. Naturally, there's a reason to why most people struggle with these choppers. Today I hope to convince you of how amazing these underrated aircraft are, to let you know how to maximise your effectiveness in these vehicles, and to give you some tips for surviving the daunting dogfights that await you. Just before I continue, if I make this tow missile shot, you all have to subscribe. God damn it. Well, you should subscribe anyway. I think there are two main reasons why people dislike the attack choppers initially. The first is that they're much less manoeuvrable and much easier to hit when compared to both the Nightbird and the stealth choppers. This means that dodging Lissiles and other ground fire is much harder, which naturally means that your survivability in these choppers is smaller. The second, and in some cases the main reason, is that dogfights between attack choppers and the Nightbird or stealth can seem absolutely hopeless. You're equipped with limited rockets, which need to directly hit enemy choppers to deal damage. Meanwhile, they're equipped with machine guns, which can just spray you until you go down. They absolutely have the advantage here, and making it so that you have a chance in the air battles takes a lot of practice. But both of these can be overcome, and once you figure it out, you can absolutely dominate a game by shutting down all enemy vehicles and bombarding enemy points with a hail of fire. Let's first discuss the maneuverability. The Apache and the Hokum are not as zippy as the Nightbird, and as such you can't fly it the same way. The weapons that the attack chopper are equipped with are best used at a specific range, so you'll want to stay at a pretty decent height when you're coming in for your attack run. While you're doing this, you should be planning your quickest path to get to cover, whether this is a building, a cliff, or a hill. Flying up so high, you're an easy target for AA missiles, but if you've planned ahead, you'll have time to pop flares and retreat to your cover before the enemy can shoot you down. There, you can wait for your flares to replenish, heal up if necessary, and punish whoever caused you hassle. Doing this will increase your survivability massively. Don't be afraid of getting low to the ground if you need to, as long as you're moving quickly, making it impossible for anyone below you to get an easy kill. Exploiting cover as a pilot is what makes your most common threat, the anti-air missiles, useless against you. Also be sure to exploit the out-of-bounds terrain in order to sneak upon your big threats, like the Wildcat or Tor rail tank. Flying directly towards these is a great way to paint a target on yourself. By sneaking up and then attacking, you can have half of their health bar already destroyed before they can even react. Let's cover dogfights. There's no way around it, you need to get better at these if you want to survive. What's that I hear you say? You need to have anti-air missiles equipped in order to stand a chance? Bah, what a load of bull nonsense. What you need to do is practice hitting air targets with the 127mm anti-vehicle rockets. The key is to aim above the enemy chopper and use the previous rocket as a guide as to where you should aim. The 127mm come out of different sides of the chopper. I found that focusing on just one side and aiming with that rocket's path will help you aim the chopper better, since otherwise you're going to have to turn the chopper between shots and you'll lose where your rockets are going to go. Keep climbing, since hitting these shots from below is much harder than from above. Fire your rockets slowly, you want to aim and make every one of them count. As soon as you blow through all of your rockets, it's usually hard to come back. Thankfully, you have one massive advantage here. These rockets deal 50 damage, so you only need 2 of them to land against Nightbirds and stealth choppers to secure the kill. Something else to consider during dogfights is the second seat. The passenger gun is amazing for helping here. If you have a good gunner, you'll be in a really good spot during these fights. Make sure that you're close enough and angle the front of the chopper up so that they can get their shots in. You don't have a gunner? No worries. Hop on that seat yourself mid-fight to get the last few shots in. Yes, you leave yourself stationary, but if you're out of rockets then it'll be more active than sitting waiting around for them to replenish. Plus the damage on this gun is very significant. If you can land all of your shots, you can destroy a chopper before it can put up much of a fight, but hitting them all is pretty difficult. I will say that the best way to win a dogfight is to prevent it from ever happening to begin with, by getting the jump on them. Choppers are much easier to hit when they're not looking at you head on, since there's much more area for your rockets to hit. This all sounds like a lot of effort. Why wouldn't you just use the air-to-air missiles? Well, this is a perfect opportunity to discuss the weapons of the attack choppers.
We got a fucking enemy tank here, 170 meters.
Why did DICE make these smart rockets the first weapon that players are introduced with in these helicopters? These rockets lock onto ground armor, but they aren't exactly intuitive. You need to launch the first rocket towards your target, then the lock will confirm and the shots will now travel towards the vehicle. The problem with these is that they're so slow that you cannot do anything with them other than shoot ground armor. Infantry are hard to hit with these rockets since you have to lead your target so much, and completely forget about hitting enemy choppers. They work with recon designated targets to make the lock easier, but it doesn't increase the damage or have any other real benefits. From the enemy target's perspective, these smart rockets will immediately appear as an incoming missile warning, which means that they're easy to thermal smoke and APS. Remove these from your chopper as soon as you unlock. The anti-vehicle rockets are the major strength of the Apache and Hokum. Imagine the smart rockets, except good. They fly much faster than the smart rockets, so you can effectively use them against infantry, and as I mentioned before, you can learn to use them as a great anti-aircraft tool too. The cost is that they don't lock on, but honestly I think this is an advantage. When you unload a barrage onto an enemy, they have no warning ahead of time, and thermal smoke has no effect on the rounds, which means that Wildcats, which are one of your main counters, have no effective countermeasure to use. These shred through all armor, and with the use of a specific secondary, you can tear through tanks in a single pass if you can hit all of your shots. Nothing else in the game can tear through vehicles faster at range. Obviously you need to practice hitting with these. Ideally you'll want to come at enemy vehicles from the side, since your missiles come out of each wing and slowly converge, so coming at them from the side means that you're more likely to hit both the left and right rockets. They deal good splash damage, but the big damage comes from direct hits. The hardest but most important thing to learn with these rockets is how to take out enemy aircraft with them. Just like with ground targets, you want to get the jump on them from the side if possible. Thankfully, you don't need to hit a lot of these in order to take them down. As I mentioned earlier, shoot slowly, aim above, use the path of the previous shot, and focus on one rocket pod, either the left or right at a time. The anti-personnel rockets are the same rockets which you can find on the Nightbird, and any long-time Nightbird pilot will tell you the same. These used to be good, but they've been nerfed to the ground. The difference is that on the attack chopper you always had the anti-vehicle rockets, which are just strictly better, even against infantry targets. These do tiny amounts of damage to vehicles, meaning that they're worthless there. Well, against infantry they must be great, right? Wrong. Against infantry they're also pretty bad. Something about them just feels off. Like, you can never aim them accurately. They don't feel like they converge to a point. They do some splash damage, but I was having a really hard time using them. The AP rockets also replenish painfully slowly. Once you've used your full barrage, you'll have to wait an obscene amount of time for them to all come back. So for whatever reason, DICE decided to give the Hokum attack chopper an additional primary weapon over the Apache. I've seen a bunch of people swear by this weapon, so much so that they refuse to play the Apache because it doesn't have access to it. And honestly, it's fine. I would say that it pushes the Hokum to be more of an anti-infantry vehicle. The weapon works like the 30mm on the Nightbird or stealth choppers, When you choose this option, you're changing the Hokum into a bulky stealth chopper, but with a better passenger gun and the inability to use stealth or bombs. I think the reason people love it is it's pretty good against aircraft, so if you can't manage to win dogfights with the 127mm rockets, then this seems like the only viable option. The aim punch it causes to aircraft is no joke either. I've been on the receiving end of this a few times, and being knocked around makes it really hard to fight back. It's pretty effective against both infantry and ground vehicles, but not any more than the 127mm. The air-to-air missiles are fine, but you really want to be ditching them for something else more versatile. Most of your fights are going to be against infantry and ground vehicles, so choosing something so situational is a waste. A lot of players cling to these because again, they haven't gotten the hang of winning dogfights with the anti-vehicle rockets. But I think focusing on these instead of spending time on getting better with the rockets is a big mistake. These air-to-air missiles work at a range of around 400 meters and have a 1 second lock-on duration, after which you can fire the missile. These are susceptible to flares, so never fire both of them at the same time unless you're sure your opponent's flares are currently on cooldown. Fire one, wait out their flares, then lock on and fire both missiles for the kill. This sounds great on paper, but what usually happens is you fire your first missile, they flare, then while you're waiting for their flares to stop, you're being beamed by the enemy. Even if you survive their flare duration, you still have to wait to re-establish the lock, and this is more than enough time for a decent pilot to end you. If you're adamant on using these, then you need to keep enemies at range. Fly backwards, not allowing your opponent to get close enough to be able to hit you with their guns. If they pursue, you can follow through with the plan of waiting out their flares. If they don't chase you and pull off, then you need to chase them while keeping them close to the maximum range of these missiles. Also remember that if they go below radar, these missiles won't work. So for the TOW and the air-to-ground missiles, the primary use of both of these weapons is dealing with ground armor, so I thought it'd be best to compare them both while I talk and explain why I think the TOW missile is strictly better than the air-to-ground missiles. The air-to-ground missile requires a lock, which takes 2 seconds to lock on at a maximum range of 300 meters, only 1 second if your target is designated. While you're locking on, the enemy receives an indicator which is pointed directly towards you. Not only does this give them a massive heads up to what is coming, but it allows them valuable time to fight back, or simply countermeasure your missile away. In comparison, the TOW missile gives no warning, and enemies' only counter to it is an APS or an Irish Sentinel, both of which they won't have time to deploy if you're attacking without any prior notice. Another massive win for the TOW missiles is that you can fire them, then swap to your primary weapon while you guide the missile. Combining the TOW and the 127mm rockets absolutely shreds through armor. If you can hit your shots, you can tear through a Wildcat before it can even react. The TOW missile can be used very effectively against infantry, and if you're really good with them, against aircraft. Whereas the air-to-ground missiles can only interact with these if they're tagged by a friendly recon. With a TOW missile, you fire your shot and it will constantly move towards where you're currently aiming. You want to lead the missile to where the target will be. The downside is that they usually take a minute to get used to, compared to the air-to-ground missiles which can be used easily right out of the box. I strongly recommend the TOW missiles here. The attack choppers have one more critical weapon. A weapon which I think has always been really good but recently got a massive buff to make it something incredible. I am of course talking about the 30mm cannon on the passenger seat. This thing is something else. If you have even a mediocre gunner on this seat, you're going to see the real strength of this vehicle. Combining the anti-armor power of the main seat and the lethal anti-infantry capability of the gunner, you can absolutely shut down enemy teams. The 30mm gun is great against anything. It rips through infantry, it can support your pilot breaking through armor, and it can tear through enemy aircraft as if they were wet tissue paper. The weapon does have quite a slow velocity, so be sure to aim where your target is going to be to account for the distance that the shots need to travel. Also be aware of the overheat level that you're currently at. It is usually more valuable to stop shooting and miss the kill than it is to overheat to try and secure it. since being shut out of your weapon can mean missing some critical moments.
Wildcat, A2.
Cap firing goes a long way here. Practice this whenever you're trying to nail those faraway targets. And I would 1000% recommend using the IR variant of this weapon. Being able to pick out enemy targets is already difficult from the sky, not to mention when you're being thrown around by your pilot. But the thermal visioning makes this so much easier. The only thing you lose here is the zoom function, but because of the velocity of the rounds, you'll never need the zoom anyway because anything you would need it for is going to have moved by the time the rounds reach them. Focus on close and medium range targets with the 30mm and you'll have a great time. In terms of countermeasures and equipment, flares and repair are your go-to here. I think the cyber warfare protection system is kind of a waste, since its use is completely dependent on whether there's an enemy RAW trying to constantly hack you. Since Season 6, RAW's hack, and EMP in general, pushes your vehicle into a damaged state. When you're like this, you can still shoot, but you won't be able to deploy countermeasures, and your movement speed and maneuverability will be crippled. A good way to reduce risk here is to pop flares before the hack affects you. Since you deployed your flares before the hack, you'll still be protected from lock-ons while the flares are deploying. The damage state is pretty significant, as it will reduce your capability to fly and maneuver, but thankfully using the repair will remove this debuff. Repair heals 25 damage over the duration of 5 seconds. However, any damage you take while this repair is happening will interrupt it, and you'll miss out on the healing. Pop this whenever you lose health and you're not likely to get hit. Flares and how you use them are the most critical part of survival in aircraft. Despite my constant calling of how ineffective they are, most players still resort to using stingers and anti-air missiles as their only way of countering aircraft. A good pilot should almost never be killed by these. They do this by using flares combined with their environment in order to never be at risk from taking 2 shots in a row. As I mentioned earlier on in the video, once you see that missile incoming, you need to pop flares and pull back to cover. There, you wait for them to replenish, then continue your run. Getting greedy and trying to snag kills before your flares run out will usually lead to you getting hit, so try to work on this. Time for some tips. If you've taken significant damage in an engagement, you can wait until your repair function is available or your self-heal kicks back in. But if you want to get back into the fight faster and you're an engineer, don't be afraid to land and repair. I recommend heading a reasonable distance out of bounds and landing, then hopping out to repair. Obviously, since you're out of bounds, you'll need to re-enter the chopper before the 10-second out of bounds cooldown triggers to avoid a suicide. Before you land, you should make sure that there are no jets or choppers looking for you, since if you do land while they're close, they will absolutely have no problem wrecking you while you're at your most vulnerable. If you're on PC, then I would strongly recommend rebinding the exit vehicle on your aircraft. As default, it is set to E, and I don't know if it's just because I have butterfingers, but I found myself constantly accidentally bailing out of the aircraft because it is so close to my directional controls. I put it on the Y key since it's not next to anything I would typically use. On the topic of setting changes, I recommend upping your vehicle FOV to maximum since this will let you see more potential threats. Cabal 2040, who is a really good attack chopper pilot, recommends increasing the minimap view distance, as this will let you use the minimap to find potential victims faster. As I mentioned earlier, the TOW on the 127mm rocket combo is absolutely lethal to ground armor. What I recommend is first firing your TOW, let it make some distance, and then swap to your 127mm rockets, and try to get the timing so that both the TOW and your first rocket hit at roughly the same time. The TOW deals the most damage, so having it hit first means that it's much less likely to be APS'd. Not having the TOW hit is very significant, and it can make any fight draw out much longer than it needs to. You should try and get into the habit of only firing your flares when you see that missile incoming warning, and not when you see that lock-on warning. A lot of Stinger players have been using the weapon a lot, and they know if you fire your flares preemptively while they're just locking, then they won't have to waste a missile on you. They can hold this lock for as long as they have you in range. Waiting until they fire has two big advantages. The first is that you might find yourself in a position where you can get to cover before the delayed anti-air missile hits you. This way you won't have to waste your countermeasures. The second is that once the air missile is launched, you get an indicator showing the missile, meaning that it's very easy to find where that player launched from, so you can easily kill them, either before your flares run out or during your next pass. If you're designated, you do have one additional concern here. You see, the M5 and the RPG rounds can lock onto you while you're in this state, but you should be aware that these rounds travel much faster than the Stinger or Javelin rounds, so you might need to pop flares instantly as soon as you see the missile incoming. When I've been designated, my finger is constantly hovering over the deploy's flare key, since a lock-on with the M5 or the RPG can end my run instantly, with only a tiny opening for this death to be avoided. Both the pilot and the gunner should be spotting their targets. If you're the pilot, spotting large groups of infantry can give your gunner a heads up as to what they should be focusing on. Less rockets wasted on these targets is a good thing, since the 30mm gun can clean them up easily. If you're the gunner, especially if you have the IR, then you should be spotting everything. Your increased visibility means that you have a distinct advantage compared to the pilot at picking out targets. Spot everything, especially important enemy targets that are a threat to your attack chopper. Things like the Tor, Wildcats or other aircraft. Hell, if spotting them isn't enough to get your pilot to notice, type in chat if you have the ability to do so quickly. Or if they're in your squad, use VoIP. If you're flying solo, don't neglect seat swapping. When you swap seats, your chopper doesn't just fall straight to the ground, but rather it begins to slowly descend. Pick out your targets in the pilot seat beforehand, then quickly stop, beam them down with the 30mm gun, then swap back to resume piloting control. This is especially useful in dogfights and has saved me plenty of times. Sometimes you just need one more rocket to hit, but you can't get it. Swap to the gunner seat to deal that last lethal point of damage. Not only does this work really well to catch enemy pilots off guard, but it feels really cool to do. I will warn you that if you have an open squad and squad members who are occasionally spawning on you, it's not uncommon to have them spawn into the pilot seat while you're mid-seat swap. And if they don't know how to fly, you best like tasting dirt, because the ground is the first place they're going to throw the chopper. If you are this teammate, then as soon as you spawn into the pilot seat of the chopper that you don't know how to fly, then please bail out immediately, and don't just try to learn how to fly in someone else's chopper. In terms of major threats, we've already touched on enemy aircraft and AA missiles, but you should also be looking out for the following. Liz's TGM is one of the best counters for aircraft in the game. If you're doing well at dominating the enemy team, you're going to start to see more and more people swap to Liz to try and counter and shoot you down. The way you prevent this is by simply dodging the Lissile. They're very easy to identify with their red hue and unique sound. They are such a massive threat to you that in most cases, when you hear one of these, you should stop what you're doing and perform evasive maneuvers. Thankfully, the Apache and the Hokum can take one of these missiles without being destroyed, since they deal about 80 damage, but they obviously leave you very vulnerable. And since Liz has 2 TGMs to use, if the first one hit, you can expect the second one to be following it up. Wildcats equipped with AA missiles are my favourite. Their drivers will waste time locking onto me while I run over them with the Tor and the anti-vehicle rockets. These aren't a threat. Wildcats with and who exclusively use the 30mm or the 35mm cannons are a big threat. Drivers wielding the 30mm dual cannons can shred through you over an extended fight. Their damage is maximised up close, but they can still do good damage at range. It's best to ambush these drivers. Wildcats using the 35mm cannons can tear through you if they can hit their shots. Up close they'll wreck you with no issue. But this cannon becomes more and more difficult to use it as you put distance between them and you. I recommend ambushing these Wildcats or dealing with them at range. TORs have been a scourge to aircraft since their inception. Thankfully, most TOR users just camp, so once you notice them, working around them and ambushing them is not usually an issue. You should keep an eye out for their unique lens flare and round tracer. Once you notice it, depending on how far away they are from you, you should react accordingly. If they are far, then you need to get low and out of bounds. Try to find cover to prevent them from sniping you. Now you need to try and make your way towards them. The real tank rounds are easier to hit at far distances, so the closer you are, the harder the shots will be to land. Once you're up close, you need to just stay high up. Tall rail tanks have no way to counter you as long as you're able to stay above where their main turret can aim. They will likely pop APS to try and save them for a few seconds, but just save your rockets and missiles until it wears off and then nail them. This is almost the same for main battle tanks, except they do have some tools that can make it a little dangerous for you. But in most cases, just staying above them out of the main cannon's sightline will be more than enough to secure the kill. I'm not a pilot, but that gunner seat sure looks like a good time. Don't worry man, I got you. Time for some quick gunner seat tips. If you see an enemy vehicle that you believe your pilot is going for, make sure that you let them get the first shots in. If you shoot first, it might cause the enemy to activate their APS or retaliate before your pilot is ready to engage. They have the main anti-tank tools, so it is much more important to have their TOW and rockets hit first. As soon as they open up and you see those first shots hit, it's open season. Time for you to blast them.
300 meters away.
Use the thermal vision if it's available.
Going for the cab.
You use it by just clicking your regular aim key, and if it's equipped it will make your job much easier, since it makes spotting enemies a breeze. If you notice your pilot is flying higher and higher, then this usually means that they're readying up for a dogfight. Stop firing at ground targets and let your weapon cool down. They will need your support. I know it's difficult to identify sometimes, but the more attention you pay to what your pilot is doing, the more in sync your attacks will be, and therefore how much more successful your chopper runs will be. On the topic of dogfights, you'll usually want to be aiming above your target and using the round traces to identify where your shots will hit. Prioritize infantry threats. Just like the pilot, you can see who fires stingers and Lissiles. As soon as you identify who is targeting you, make them a priority. If your pilot is smart, they'll be trying to kill them too, or flying away from them. Help them strike the killing blow and neutralize the threat. Wow, that was a lot. I really love the attack choppers, and I really think learning to fly and hunt with them is so much fun. I would strongly recommend trying these out, especially if you're a Nightbird or a stealth pilot who hasn't put much time in them. I think they're very rewarding and very powerful if played right. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any tips of your own which I missed, I would love to hear them in the comments. And if you liked the video, please like and subscribe and share with your friends. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Take care.